There it is. So what we're going to do is, if you need to ask a question, then if you look in the center of your bar, at the bottom bar of your Zoom page, you'll see an icon there, and it says something like participants or manage, something like that. I think it's participants. What you want to do is you want to click on that and unmute that when it's time for you to ask a question, and then mute it back when your question is answered, please. And I'll see those hand raises. We have a good group today. We have what looks like we got about 18, so we're missing a few, but we're going to plow on. Let me get my camera fixed so that vanity. Now, go ahead and unmute yourselves and let's say hello.
Hello.
And actually, I can unmute. Well, go ahead and I'll unmute you all. So there's some background noise, but let me just say, I'll go down the track as I see it. Actually, I can see that ain't going to work because there's a lot of background somewhere. Whenever you come on, please remember that you are on microphone, and anything you do, anything you're going to do is going to be exaggerated because we're all going to hear it by microphone, and they're very sensitive. So noise and movements at your desk are going to be noticed right away. So welcome to Satsang. Let's see. I'll go around and just say hello to everybody, and you can nod if you wish. Hello, Mike. Good to see you. And Robin, how are you? And Tom, good to see you as ever. And there's Harvey Jackson. Glad to see you, Harvey. And this Ramesh, good to see you again, sir. A bright light. David, always good to see you. Rick, I think we got it. Rick, are you a new face for us today? Is this your? Yes, I thought so. Well, welcome. That's great. Glad to have you. And Philip Darby, and good to see you, sir. And Joyce Anderson, hi, dear. How are you? And Cindy Zucker. I sent you 2 emails, Cindy, because I had 2 mail addresses for you, and I didn't know which one was best. If you'd let me know which one's best, that would be great. Lana, hello. How's my bright light in Canada? Great. And Joel, hello. And someone is sitting in, it says Elaine, but I don't think that's Elaine unless she's grown a beard since the last time that she was here. So,
Hi, this is David Grease. Elaine is getting some tea at the moment.
Okay,
she'll
perfect.
Be here in a minute.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Very
Yes.
well done there, by the way. Kathy, hello. And Toby, hello. Good to see you. Even if I can't see you, good to be with you. And 802-353-5452. Someone's with us who's on just via telephone. Can you share with me, please? Or can you talk to me so that I can hear you? Unmute who's ever on the telephone. If you, well, you probably can't unmute yourself. So let me see if I can. Let's see. I'd like to find out a little bit more about how all this works. I've only done it about 20 times, but I never take the time to explore the technology. And I'm going to just unmute and see what happens. Can the person on the telephone say hello?
Hey, Fred. Hey, Fred. This is Lynn. Fred.
It's
Hi, Fred. This is Lynn.
Hey, Lynn. How are you?
I am very well. I'm sorry I'm bringing in some static.
That's all right. I'm glad to find out that we can talk back and forth. I don't think I've ever addressed anyone on the phone before.
I'm muted. I thought I was unmuted.
So I'm going to mute it again in just a moment. Okay, Lynn, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, now you're muted back, and we've got a little silence. We're not going to worry about a little static. So welcome to Satsang. Man, it looks like you're just crammed in on my face. Let me see if I can back up just a little bit here. I'm there now. I don't look so much like I'm crowding you. What I want to do is I'm going to try the speaker view for just a little bit, because we're not going to be doing question and answer. And this will, well, now I've got nobody talking. Let's see. Okay, so I guess I'm not going to be doing speaker view. So I'll be doing this view so that we can see everybody. I had thought we would, on speaker view, typically whoever's talking is the person that's on camera. And that would be nice, but I'll work with that later. I've done it before. I don't know why it didn't work this time, but it didn't, which is fine. I'll just stay on this. So if you look to your upper right, you will see where it says you have a chance for speaker view or gallery view. And you want to click on gallery view, and that's when you'll be able to see everybody else that's with us. Oh boy, we got a Zed, good to have you with us. And if you, just for those of you who are off camera, that's fine. If that's the way, if you need to remain anonymous, we don't have any problem with that. If anybody is off camera by accident, then go ahead, please, and look at the little icon over to the very left of your screen, and you'll see an icon of a little camera, and it have a red line through it. And if you want us to see you, then please click that. So, hey, Joel. Good to see you. Okay. So now that we've got all the technical stuff out of the way, welcome to Satsang. I'm very, very glad to be with you. Satsang, of course, means association with truth. And that's why we're here today, is to associate with truth, is to be in the truth. It's not that we can avoid being in the truth, but we want to be consciously in the truth. It's very important to have community, because this joined intention is powerful. And it's powerful when we're in session, and it's also powerful when we're not in session. I'm going to go right here. I wanted to check my email and make sure I didn't have anybody locked out. So today's going to be primarily question and answer. I'm going to try something new today, and that's that where the question allows it, I'm going to answer you two ways. The first way I'm going to answer it, and I'll tell you what I'm doing when I do it, because a lot of times there's a lot of confusion on the languaging of this thing, because where is it that where is it that the teacher is speaking from, and what's the speaker teaching of? In other words, is the speaker talking about a relative practical view, or is it talking about a radical absolute view? Because non-duality is neither one of those. We have to use that because that's what we have, but it's neither one of those. The true non-dual is holding both at the same time. It's a little tricky, takes a while, but we can do it. It's so I'll tell you that I'll be answering from the radical view or the universal view, and I'll be answering from a practical view. And I'm going to try to divide those up so that there's less confusion today, and there might be a little bit more preciseness for us in my answers. And what I'd like to do right now is to let's do just 5 minutes even of group meditation, you can call it, but we can just really, it's inquiry or it's investigation. You don't have to close your eyes. You can if you want to, but let's just notice that we know that we're alive, that there is an inherent aliveness here. It can't be missed. Without that aliveness being present, this talking can't occur. Without this aliveness being present, the hearing can't occur. In the absence of this aliveness, which I term the sense of being, because we don't need to know a lot of deeper truths at this moment. All we need to know is that we are, or that there's certainly a sense of being. Whether we are or not, who knows? It's philosophical. What we want to do is stick with our experience, our actual experience here and now. In the absence of that sense of being, this meeting can't take place, because there must be observing. If I use a little bit of just slightly sloppy language, then I can say there must be an observer. But that's scientifically true, but it's not necessarily mystically true. But there certainly must be an observing. In the absence, and I'll say observer after having qualified it. So it's this observer, whatever it is, wherever it is, the one who's listening to this voice, you know that you are. You know that you exist. Now, it may be interesting for you to note that it's very easy for you to report to me that you are, and that it is impossible to report to me what you are. If you say oneness, that's fine. It's not totally inaccurate. It's just that it's just a word. And what you are is prior to language. This is the reason that you can't report what you are. You can say God, you can say consciousness, you can say truth, you can say anything you want, but that's not the description, or the symbol, which is what the word is not the thing. This very sense of being, how can I can describe it in the sense that I say, if I were to put you in a sensory deprivation tank where you're getting no input, you're not seeing, hearing, feeling anything, because the water temperature is the same as your skin. But if I take away all your sensory input, you still know that you're alive. It's unmissable. None of this can take place without that basic aliveness. Without that aliveness, there's no space, there's no time. Because there must be an observer, or space, or time to actually be. And when I say space, let me say here that when I speak of your true nature, and I use the word space, that's a convenient term. It's also inaccurate, but it's so convenient that most of us use it quite a bit. When I say spaciousness, it gets us away from thinking about, it is this, but it's not this. In other words, we could think of this as the air. But air actually has volume. So air is something. It has a certain density. It has a very low density at the bottom of a mountain and a very high density at the bottom of a mountain and a very low density at the top. So when I speak of space, I'm not speaking of the air. Just notice that the air is being held. It's being held by spaciousness itself. We can measure air. If we go to the moon, we can't find any. If we go to Mars, we can't find any. We may find some kind of atmosphere, but we can't breathe up there. So spaciousness is actually something that's beyond comprehension. We can know of it, but we can't know it, as if from afar. You can't know yourself from afar. You can only know yourself right here. See, the very consciousness that's here, not some extravagant, outlandish, mystical, wonderful consciousness, but this basic everyday consciousness that's right here, that's speaking, that's listening, that's looking with either eyelids open or closed, but it's still looking. It's looking, it's hearing. This body is actually a sensing mechanism for your true nature. Since in a unradical way, in a practical way, I can say that you are oneness, which is not untrue. I can say that you are oneness and that you are all that is. And this sensing mechanism is just like my thermometer. I cut my thermometer every day to certain degrees and change it at night and this and that and the other, so that I feel in a certain way. But the one who feels is not the body. The body gets that information, but that information doesn't stop at the brain. The one who feels it is that aliveness. And you know that this aliveness is present in each of you because in the absence of aliveness, we got 20 cadavers. Just that simple. We just have 20 dead bodies. You are that which animates these bodies. And you've come today in many different uniforms to come to know yourself better. And we'll do that by talking about you. Because what we've discovered is that when you talk about awakeness, you are embodying awakeness. When you are involved in a group like this with a focused intention to be alert, that's vital. If I didn't have, for years I had no community. I finally began to kind of grow my own around here. I woke up a few people around here, and then I had a little bit of community. But primarily, my community is here. And it's important for me. When Betsy and I go on one of our 4-day holidays, which we try to do every month, then, or 3-day holidays as is, and I usually take 4, 3 together, 4 for me. I miss it. I can literally feel that I'm missing it. I'm just missing myself, but I'm missing the embodiment of myself, the conscious embodiment of myself. I'm still conscious. I know who I am, but it's a little different. I can now see I've gone way, way, way over 5 minutes, which is what happens. All that I can ever do is announce my intention. And what happens here? It just happens, folks. So we're going to go now to question and answer. If you have a question, then please look at that little thing in that little icon in the center of your bottom bar, and find, like Joel just has, find the raise hand feature. Okay, Joel, I see you're unmuted. Please go ahead and lower your hand so I can talk to you later if you have another question.
Okay.
Great. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Great.
A couple things
Yeah.
come up for me when you talk about conscious embodiment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware that as the Joel unit, as I go about daily life, a lot of that feels like it's like I'm on automatic, and the Joel unit is just doing his thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I try throughout the day. Sometimes I wear a rubber band, actually, with the goal in the morning for my morning meditation of try to remember 25 times during the day, Joel, to just remind yourself of the truth.
Yeah.
To literally come back and remind myself to see through Joel, not as Joel.
That's
That
right.
there's only one thing going on.
Yeah.
Last meeting I was in, you talked about where oneness is kind of like a background music for you. It's there all the time.
That's right.
And I don't experience that in that way, but I try to consciously remind myself of that. That's one thing.
Yes.
The other thing that I realize is, and there's been a few things that have gone on in these past few weeks, using your terms of the little me and the big me.
Uh-huh.
The thing that draws, that seems to magnetize the little me, is emotion. You know, if I get a little resentment or I get my feelings hurt or something like that, and then my mind is trying to remind myself of the truth, you know, to let myself know that, you know, this is all just thought going through you, Joel. It has no real meaning.
That's right.
It's nothing. And yet I can feel that emotion tugging the little guy along, you know, not wanting to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting process. And of course, being who I am, is I want to find, you know, the little guy also wants to find the instant key, which will just turn it all off into a good feeling immediately, you know,
Yes.
and let any discomfort go. But the best I can do is just try and notice it, you know. It's going to play its course, I guess. Anyway, those are a couple things I thought I'd see if you could talk a little bit about.
Thank you, Joel. So let me answer this from the radical view first, and then I'll answer it from the practical view. And from the radical view, which I just am doing this so that we are always remembering that anytime we're talking about the dream, we're talking about the dream, that we're talking about, you know, quite literally a dream. This is a dream-like thing we have here. It's unstable. These things are not stable. So from a radical view there, whatever your dream character does is okay. Because I know you know this, but I speak to everyone, and it's a good reminder even for me, like I'm at the top of the mountain, which I'm not. These characters have been around in different phases and forms for a long, long time. Your truest true nature, In other words, this is the bottom line true nature. I'll use oneness as your true nature and all of that, but I'm now going beyond that. And when you do not know I am, you still are. You are always there. But you don't know that you are. There's no experience happening. So we can't have knowledge of the lack of experience. Any knowledge we will have will be based on some kind of experience. So when you move from that, and when you move from the unconscious awakeness, just when you move from what you are, which is, I will call noneness, to give it a title so that we can speak of it. When you move from noneness to the sense of I am, there's when it happens through one of these, and I think it can rarely, Ramana Maharshi, I'm just speaking from another teacher that I respect now. I'm not speaking from my own experience. I don't think. I might be. But what we know for sure is that you can come to know yourself through these human beings. And there's some indication that you may do it very, very rarely through some other being. At least on this planet, an animal. The individual, when you go from noneness to oneness, and there is this form that because if you want the experience of being, one of these is always available. Just that's the way it works. So when you move from that generalized, the universal I am, and move into the story of I am this, there's a joy in that for this. It knows I am. Oh. You know, it knows that to begin with. It knows I am, but now it knows when the moment it's that there's consciousness there. That when the baby comes out of the mother's womb, it knows am. And there may be some little sense of I am, but it's chiefly just am for the first couple of years. Then we move into I am and I am this. This is where the lie really began when there was an apparent birth. But the more obvious lie begins right here when we jump into the story of I am Fred. I am this individual. And the trick is that these, when we identify with, when one of these is born, it has a sense of individuality. That's its essence. The essence of salt is saltiness. The essence of sweet is sweetness. The essence of, so I could say the essence of I've got some wonderful grapes in my refrigerator, and their essence is sweetness. And I could, if I had a lemon, its essence would be tartness. And the essence of one of these things, what comes when one of these is opened up, is a sense of individuality. And that sense of individuality feels incredible. No sense of being on the planet, because there's a sense of individuality in cats and dogs and horses. There's just not a lot of story attached to it. I can't say there's not a little story, because you can imprint one, but there's not much in the way of story with animals. But there's story that we glom onto here. And because we love this so much, because we're now open, what have we done when we say I am? we've opened the door to desire. Simultaneously, we open the door to fear. If I don't know that I am, no birth, no death, no being, no non-being. So it's only upon the realization of I am. Nisargadatta used to laugh and say, I didn't ask for this, right? It's been visited upon me without my permission. And he says, and that's when all the trouble begins. And it is where all the trouble begins, because only in an awakened, at least in an unconsciously awake state, there is suffering, and there can be suffering in an awakened state too, but it can't be actually inhabiting exactly the same territory at exactly the same time. It's just doing this so fast that it appears to be a constant experience of one or the other. But it can be happening with that background music still on. Because no being wants to unbe, wants to stop being. It's the sense of being is we have it and we share it with every sentient being on the planet. So this sense of being wants to perpetuate itself. And you will hear the saying that all is consciousness, and that's true. If we equate consciousness in this teaching at this moment, we will equate it with manifestation. Everything is consciousness, meaning that manifestation and consciousness, for this moment, are synonyms. Consciousness wants to be. And it's the consciousness that's coming through every being that wants to be. I mean, if you put your hand like this with a fly, it goes, man. And it's not thinking anything. It just doesn't. It just wants to preserve its sense of being. When there is I call it the package. And now we're jumping into speaking of the dream state, okay? Within the dream state, which is where this sense of I am is taking place, where this sense of individuality is taking place, that's not taking place in truth. It's taking place within the dream. Because what's really true, we can't even speak of. Within the dream, which is me, when I say our dream, I don't mean to downplay it. I don't want to diminish it. I just want to say that the dream is, we could say that that's synonymous with our experience as human beings, which is wonderful and sucks out loud, depending on how we're doing it at the time. But this sense of being, when it has these desires to experience, so long as this sense of being has a desire to experience, it will perpetuate itself. Consciousness wants to, in other words, this is where within the dream, this is where we have reincarnation. In truth, there's no Fred present. There's no Fred presently incarnated. So if there's no Fred presently incarnated, then in the universal view, there's no Fred incarnated. I can't reincarnate. Fred can't reincarnate because he's not here to begin with. That is the radical view. And it's a true view, but it's not a practical view. It's not so very useful. It's useful to have as background. But what you're speaking of, which we will talk about most of in this teaching, is you're speaking about day to day within the dream, and you're speaking of the experience of this being through which conscious awakeness is beginning to function, and and your experience as conscious awakeness coming through this unit. And sometimes you'll be reporting from conscious awakeness, and sometimes you'll be reporting from Joel. That's how it works until it doesn't. So this reincarnation comes from within the dream. There's a package. There's not a Fred package. There's no constant Fred here, but there are thoughts, memories, desires, right? Those are memories and thoughts, projections, but there are these desires. And these desires will basically, they perpetuate birth, rebirth. Now, there's not been any birth at all. Back to the universal, just so that we stay clear. There's not been any birth here at all. We can go into that if someone wants to ask about it, where we can just examine the fact that there's not been any birth. It's clear as day, but it's not clear as day until it is, until we are actually helped to see it. So what I'm saying here is, if you look, let's just say that the package, let's equate the package with DNA. And we can both, Joel, you and I can both trace our DNA back to whatever it is, 600,000 years ago in Africa or something like that. I think they've not bested Lucy yet. See, this is the funny thing, is I want you to notice something here, and I read the technical details on this past week. But when an egg and a sperm come together and that DNA replicates, the nucleus that replicates that DNA is of the father and only. And that which surrounds it, which is another name for that, is of the mother. The father, that center is what changes. So that comes up to life, and that through this new being, not exactly the same DNA, comes to life through this new being, and it is conditioned, and it's changed via its conditioned. And if desires remain intense, it's coming back when the unit dies. That package will re-perpetuate, perpetuate rebirth. So, but that outside, what surrounds the nucleus, that doesn't change. If you trace it back, it's just so strange, but I accept it as true because I accept the scientific source that I got it from. We essentially all have the same mother. So here you begin to see oneness on a whole nother level. Because the mother, that DNA doesn't change. It goes up unchanged. So Lucy was my mother. Lucy was your mother. There's a common bond here that goes way beyond anything we can try to understand with the mind. It's like trying to understand what I'm talking about with just the mind. You can follow a certain logic, but you can't quite get there with the mind. So what I'm saying is that the Joel, to come back to your question at last, is that the Joel conditioning, which is what you're reporting on, the quote Joel conditioning has been around for thousands of years. It's not just what's happened. Conditioning is not about what's happened in this unit's lifespan. It's about what's happened in all of its lifespans. Once, boy, I'm so sorry. I sold it when I was poor, and I can't find it since. But I used to have a beautiful art book. It was a small print well, of a beautiful art book, and the front of it was something like Zen art, but it wasn't that because I can't find it under that. So, but at any rate, and the cover of it had a picture of a monk at the front of a Zen monk at the front of a line with a trail, like a kind of a ghostly trail of monk after monk after monk after monk after monk after monk after monk behind it. And and we are the head monk. Our experience right now is that of the head monk. But when we say our experience, we have to recognize that, if you take this look, I like science. I like looking at it because I find it very helpful for the mind. It's not that, because when we begin to lower what we're doing here away from being something entirely, okay, Cindy, gotcha. So the mind gets more comfortable. And what the mind gets more comfortable with, it begins to allow things in, particularly when about things that it's not, that are new to it. Because the whole default position here is no. Because I'm safe like I am, so no. Thank you, but no. The reason that, for those of you who've experienced the homecoming story in a private, well, actually in group awakening sessions too, for those of you who's gone through the homecoming story, the reason that I use a story to convey that is that the ego, for whatever reason, will just let a story pass on through. I can sit there and announce at the beginning of the story, so this is like a mystical, powerful story, and it's going to change your life if you can really let go, and it won't matter. It'll go, you're okay, sure. And you come in and you tell that story, and bam, it and that conscious awakeness wakes up over there in that relative location. So you're not. So this head monk with all the monks behind him, that's Joel. And so the default conditioning there is enormous. It is unfathomable, the conditioning. Now here's something else that I've learned this past week, which I'll share with you, which is that, and I already knew this because I have a neuroscientist who is a student, but she didn't explain it to me quite as clearly as this scientist did, which is that the cerebral cortex, the front of the brain, it actually makes very few decisions. And I could explain this in mystical terms, and I do all the time. I'm just explaining it right now in another way because I've got a big group of people. I don't know what's going to reach who. It makes very few decisions is what they say. I say it makes no decisions whatsoever. But they say it makes a few. I'll live with that. Because it's easier for us to accept the fact, well, I've got this teeny little bit of free will. Hang on to it as long as you're willing to suffer over it. So, but it is the amygdala, I believe is what they call it, which is this primal brain, that's actually making almost all of any unit's decisions, because this thing doesn't, because there's so much going on here. You've seen it. If you had that awakening moment of and some of you did and some of you didn't, but it doesn't matter whether you did or didn't. But if you did, and I can also say if you've ever done a hallucinogenic drug like LSD or something like that, then what you have seen is that there's a hell of a lot more going on here than meets the eye. And what the mind does is it filters out the bulk of reality to give us this little experience that we can actually deal with, right? But this thing is automatically bam, 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 making decisions that never reach me. In other words, it's the DNA. It's that package that's making those decisions. And as a result of this, the way that it's now described is that we find out that we actually can't narrow that even from the scientific view, much less the mystical view, which happens to be identical, is that we cannot find the character. We can find a Fred Ness, which is this unit, has certain patterns. That's fine. We can find Fred Ness, but we can't find Fred. The scientists can find Fred Ness, but the funny thing is that Fred Ness doesn't stop at the boundary of this body. It goes on out forever, because what they found out is that, as the ecologists say, we are part of the ecosystem. The ecosystem is constantly, when there's so much conditioning here, can you imagine trying to make the thought about whether I should move my hands or not? I mean, if I had to stop to do that, it's just happening. I'm not making up my mind. I got no idea what my hand's going to do next. I really don't. They just do it, and then there may be part of me that comes in behind and says, "Good decision. You moved your hand like that. Excellent job. Do that some more." But that's a post-event declaration, because they can measure it. And I'm not saying there aren't differing opinions, but I'm saying there's a whole lot of very smart people, smarter than me, who declare that you can see the light come on in the amygdala, which is when it makes this a decision, and then right after that, one lights up here that says, "And the reason I'm doing this is," begins to tell the story and begins to take ownership of that movement. So this is what you're, quote, up against. So when we wake up, we don't wake up to all this scientific stuff that I've been talking about, not in scientific terms, but that's what we wake up to, in the sense that awakening is seeing that there's no individual me, that there's no Fred here. You know, just prior to moments before my awakening, Fred was trying very hard to wake up Fred. And he was sitting in Fred's living room, and Fred had a heap of problems, and he was hoping that those problems were going to be neatly taken care of. And awakening occurred, and one of the first things I noticed when I began to have collected thoughts was that, I'll be damned, these problems are still here. The good news is they're Fred's. And I could see that this body, Fredness, actually does literally have its own intelligence. It's going to do what needs to be done. And we can't see that, and that reptilian brain, it can't surrender. It's not conscious like in that way. Surrendering comes when we tell ourselves the truth. This can be done here. That's the reason that I use the mind to go in this teaching, we use the mind to go beyond the mind, because we use this to become willing for it to tell itself the truth, which is that I'm not in charge, is that there's no Fred here. Only in the recognition of that truth, we call that awakening. In the process of clearing to that truth, in the process of coming to accept and embody that truth, we call that the process of further process of awakening, or we can call it the movement to enlightenment, true enlightenment. Enlightenment is one of those words that I use in a real sloppy fashion, like most everybody else does, and I will continue to, because it's just what happens here. But in truth, I think of awakening as being the event, and enlightenment as being the process, And that process is going on well before awakening. So if there's anyone in the room who's not yet awake, you are awakening. Trust me, you don't not wind up in this room unless you are awakening. That's the law. So, and telling ourselves the truth in the same way that when I was drinking, I knew that I couldn't drink successfully for 20, 25 years. I knew that, and it was evident. I was losing wives and credit and furniture and cars and everything else, businesses. It was evident I could not drink successfully, but I couldn't. But I still continued to drink. That information was no good to me. This is like you having the information that I just can't think my way. I couldn't drink my way through life successfully. And when I quit drinking, I noticed the truth for all of us, the underlying truth, which is that I can't think my way through life successfully either. But what actually, on the day that I quit drinking, the change in that pattern was that I could see, for 2 decades, I could see I cannot drink successfully, but yet I kept on trying. The only thing that was freeing was the day that it came to me, I cannot drink successfully, and I can't quit trying to drink successfully. Oh my God. And in that recognition of that powerlessness, when I recognize I'm screwed, the door opens to freedom. And the same thing happens for us, is when we recognize I can't think successfully, and I can't quit trying. I'm powerless, but I can't quit trying to be powerful, whatever. And so when this happens, it's within that moment that surrender occurs not by us, but to us. And when that happens, when we're beginning to become willing to notice that, Joel, your default positions are just that. They're default positions. And they are patterns that go back thousands of years, and they don't wake up right away. As Fredness rebuilt into the character of Fred in my post-awakening, and I've noticed it with others that I've worked with, as that rebuilt, then what happens is that there is, with the rise of Fred, there is the lowering of clarity. Because what I wanted to have was an awake Fred, and you can't have one. Or you can have an awake, you can have a Fred, or you can have clarity. You can have a Fred, or you can have a conscious awakeness, but you can't have both at the same time. And what we're talking about is it's a trade-off here, because those patterns don't wake up. What if we wanted to look at it from the scientific view, just for the fun of it? Again, we're just trying to talk to the mind. Is that if we were to look at this part, this part, the cerebral cortex, then that's the part that wakes up. But that reptilian thing, it does not wake up. And what happens is, but now I am awake to its mechanisms. You see this? And what I become awake to is my own blindness. What I'm able to see is my own blindness. I'm able to, for the first time, to begin to be able to see the unskillful patterns in my life. But there's only a little bit of awakeness when I first wake up. In other words, there's truth here, but this is right fresh. And this has been going on for 100,000 years. This thing doesn't wake up, so guess what my default position in life is? It remains very much like it was, at least at first. In early awakening, my behavior remains very similar to what it was before I woke up. There were a few things that just fell away. But but the next day, if a cat got in my way, I was probably going to holler at it. I'm probably not going to holler at it now. Because that automatic conditioning takes over until it doesn't. And what can you do about that? You're already doing it, Joel, which is you can notice it. You can notice it in different ways. A lot of teachers like that thing where you notice awareness for, about 3 to 5 seconds or something like that. And that's perfectly valid. What I really am, because I've been just having such powerful success with it, is I'm going to recommend that for those of you who feel comfortable with it, I always offer a menu of practices, and you want to select from the menu. When I offer you the menu, I don't mean, so order one of everything, right? I want you to, so you just order what's comfortable for you. But I did a video this week on shifting practice. I did a long one and a short one. I would advise you to look at both if you're interested, because that's a slightly different way, Joel, of noticing. You can still do it very quickly. And I love your rubber band. And another way to think about that rubber band is that it's like the rubber band stretches out during the day, during your day, with Joelness. And when you stop and notice clarity, notice reality, notice the truth, it snaps back in, and then it starts pulling back out. It snaps back in when you check on it. So this shifting practice is just this, is that what you are is prior to language, as we discussed in our original meditation. It's prior to language. Do not give yourself the dubious benefit of language. Just suspend it. Boom, that. So look at, because when you can do it for 10 seconds or 10 minutes or however long you can do it, you'll be in and out for 10 minutes. You're not going to be able to sustain it. But that in and out's fine, because it's actually, because the quantity of breakthroughs, quantity is more important than duration. So breaking through over and over and over again, breaking through 25 times a day for 5 seconds is a lot better than waking up for half an hour sustained. Because when I say that, as if, I'm using dream terminology to describe awakening in the dream. So, but it's the repetitive practice of coming to see the true nature, because I have a breakthrough. The nice thing about coming here and doing this is that there's several things happening. We have a combined intention, which will raise everybody's level of awakeness while they're here. There's a tuning fork in each of you. There's a tuning fork here. That tuning fork will resonate naturally with this one and rise, and this one's resonating a little bit higher vibrations. What a world of metric frequency. Then I kept wanting to say temperature. See, than most of you. It's just the nature of it. Most of that has to do with time in grade, how long we've been awake, and how long we've been awake at each level of that increasing clarity, which makes no sense, but which we experience anyway. Good God, I hope your answer was in there. Cindy, great. Thank you, Joel. Cindy, please help me out here. Give me something new. Unmute yourself and lower your hand there, and then we'll talk. Good job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. I hope this is helpful, but it's what's going on with me right now, and that has to do with some pieces are falling away. And I'm feeling really wobbly and unstable with it.
Yeah.
And it happened with some inquiry through journaling, and I saw it as going way back to when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's people pleasing. I think probably all of us do that in some form or another. But I've built this whole me on it, you know, and I've seen through it now, and there's this, even before I realized it, I had stopped doing some people pleasing, and I thought, wow, this is so unlike me. Why am I not doing this anymore? And then the inquiry happened. It was so weird how that like got turned around. But I guess, Fred, what I'm trying to get a little help with is it all gonna fall away like that before the re-embodiment happens? Or like, I guess I'm looking about on what do I expect, or should I not expect, or I'm just feeling really unstable.
Okay. So let me further destabilize you.
Okay. That's why I'm here.
So, radical answer first, then we'll go to practical. And the radical answer, the universal answer to your question from the universal view is what I'm speaking of. There's the universal view and there's the relative view, and the two never meet. And most of our confusion in non-duality is when we're trying to take what we've seen from the universal view and apply it to the relative, and it doesn't work. And we're trying to take what's seen at the relative view and apply it to the universal, and that doesn't work. So what's the radical view is that there is what's happening is that within the dream, the Cindy character wants to know what next. See this? And it is that what nextness that's the tip off to the fact that I am undergoing an awakening process, and I'm not embodying my highest awakeness right now. Because consciousness or awakeness doesn't really care. I mean, there is no what next. There's only this. Let's try something right now. Let's do this practice I was talking about. Let's do this shifting practice together, Cindy, you and I. And y'all are, of course, welcome to join us. So, suspend all of the, because what is Cindy? What is Cindy? Cindy is, you've seen this. Cindy is a collection, isn't that correct? Memories, thoughts, perceptions, all of this. We can't find a hard Cindy. Is that correct? Is that your experience? Yes. So there's no hard candy center there. So Cindy is really is the belief in all of these memories, projections, all of that. So when I say suspend Cindy, there is no Cindy to suspend, but the Cindy-ness that is the collection of those patterns, that's what we want to suspend. Because what you are is prior to language, way prior to Cindy. And when you, conscious awakeness, become willing to suspend in any character, and you can do it in any character, anytime, so particularly if there's been awakening experience there. Suspend that right now. Do it with me right now. Drop language. Because language is not just what we talk to each other with, it's what we talk to ourselves with. Drop language. Now look around the room. Now, do you actually know what you're looking at if you don't give yourself benefit of language? I don't either, see? This is that key. We go back to that. I can report that I am, but I don't know what I am. I can certainly have a sense that this is not other than me, but I don't know what that is. See, Ramana and I could get together and I know who I am in his sense. but I don't know what that is. I know who I am, but I don't know what that is. Notice, drop sendiness, suspend your thoughts, look around. You can see for yourself there's no next. In the absence of language, there's no time. Time doesn't occur to you, it occurs upon you or within you. Upon you is slightly more accurate, but within you is the term we usually use. Time is something that the Cindy character is experiencing. It's all part of the dream. The Cindy character can only exist because of what a volume and duration. So there's within time and space, there's a certain volume and duration of an entity of an apparent entity that we're naming Cindy. But in the absence of thinking, in the absence of language, I also noticed that in the absence of language that I can't find a complaint. Just can't find one. Because in the absence of language, I can't find a Fred. Because in the absence of language, there is no world. World is a word. You are prior to that. Cindy and Fred are words. By the time we get to language, then what happens is that oneness, which is all that there is, will have had to invent a Cindy and invent a Fred. Then it's got to invent a world for them to inhabit and something for them to talk about. And once it's done all that, then it needs to invent language. So what I'm saying is that language, by the time we get to language, we're deep in the dream. What's coming out of this mouth is coming out of this mouth within the dream. What's the words that are coming out are dream words being talked, but being spoken by a dream character. And they are words, they cannot be true. They can be very, very skillful and very, very sharp. And they are both of those things. And they can be coming, they can be inspired, initiated in essence, from beyond the dream, but it's coming through this character, it's coming through this conditioning, then it hits yours, and before it hits to me again over there, you got a room full of people and no truth. Because everything's distorted. So what's falling apart is what's happening is that oneness is watching conditioning fall apart around it. Because when we wake up, what happens is that when we wake up to this truth, and there's really not anything even to talk about. It's just, and whether that's profound or subtle. And then there is a movement, which is where because it's seen from that awakened view that there's no one here. But the interesting thing is it's been seen very clearly that there's no Fred here. But I've noticed that my chief challenge in post-awakening has been dealing with the one who isn't here. In other words, is dealing with Fredness, dealing with sendiness. When there is this initial, there's no question. There's no question. Oh, this is it. This is true. I mean, we're all involved. We're all in this room because for most of our lives, or much of our lives, or some of our lives, we have known there's something more to this than meets the eye. There's something more to this than meets the I. And when we wake up, we find, oh, yes, there is more, and this is it. And we know there's absolute knowing this is true. That's why they call awakening self-confirming. It's only what needs to get confirmation from a teacher, and I've had it from a couple, and it was a great blessing at the time. But to get confirmation of our awakening, by the time we get it, we don't actually need it. But it's real nice to have. Anyway. But immediately after that moment, here comes the conditioning. And then it feels like, well, what usually happens is our hand hits the doorknob. And I can remember when I was awake for long periods of time in my living room, but I couldn't get out of that room with any degree of awakeness because the conditioning, just like Joel's, overpowered it. And what's going to most likely overpower that? Exactly what Joel's reporting, emotions and patterns. Because the emotions are patterns. But it's that whole unconscious patternness that begins to not that it really just begins to reinstate itself. We use the word rebuild as if we tore it apart and we made it disappear. We didn't. We just got it out of the room. Joyce or sendiness begins to reinstate itself immediately after awakening. But there's no Joyce, there's no Cindy. So what's actually happening there? Seeing the mechanism of this is a great movement toward understanding it. In other words, being able to accept it. And what's happening there is that conditioning. Even this is conditioning. This is conditioned space. This is conditioned space. This disappears. When this leaves the planet, you'll find the same unconditioned space that it occurred in. So there's no Joyce or Cindy or Philip to be experiencing the conditioning or the loss of conditioning. It's actually happening to the only thing that is, which is you, oneness. And what's happening is that unconscious patterns, reflexive patterns, are arising, and these patterns are arising to oneness. And the next pattern that is the unconscious pattern that says, yeah, that's right. Which is because what rises is, I don't think I'm quite as, I know I woke up, but I'm not quite as clear as I was. Yeah, that's right. But I still feel like I've almost got this thing. Yeah, that's right. That's a good thought. That bears investigation. Let's revive some other thoughts to do this investigation. And then it's this, and what's happening is that our sense of, is that knowing, because what we become awake to when we wake up, we notice that there's a knowing feeling. We can just notice that there's that sense of being, and I am it. And that begins to get washed away, and it usually does. And one of the ways that it gets washed away most commonly is by complaint. Because this little voice in the head, that's a constant complainer, isn't it? It's just, it always knows what's wrong, which is whatever's going on. Because here's the reflexive conditioning all of us have all of the time. This is that deep conditioning that that doesn't just get washed away because awakeness itself awakens. And that's that it shouldn't ought to be like this. That's the movement. And you can dress it up any way you want, but it always comes down to it shouldn't ought to be like this. I know, which is because I know what everybody should be doing, and furthermore, I notice they're not doing it. And I notice that I try to retrain these units and get them to doing the right thing, and they won't behave. It's a nightmare. So it's not what's actually happening on the radical level, but this is also a practical radicalness, is to notice that all of these thoughts are arising to oneness. And when you got this thing up here, the reflexive conditioning is that's right, you're right, yep, that's it. But what we notice is that if there's no Cindy, then there can't be a Cindy who's having these thoughts. There can't be a Cindy who's experiencing it all fall away. There is only oneness. And this reflexive conditioning is arising to oneness, but there's no Cindy. There's no ownership actually there. You can't find it. Go back when that next thought arises, ask who's saying that? Who's saying that? Which is that pieces keep falling. And I'm not saying that on a practical level that isn't occurring. I know exactly what you're talking about. It is occurring. What I'm trying to do is to show you them, rather than say, yes, that's occurring and it'll get better and better, which is not very helpful, is to go to the background and help you see the mechanism, because when we see the mechanisms of the dream, they cease to have the same impact. That's the truth. We got a better chance of clearing. So when in awakening sessions, what I do is I take people's attention and I move it through a track that has invented itself here, back and forth. Do you see this? Yeah. Do you see that? Yeah. Do you see this? Yeah. Do you see that? Do you see this? Do you see that? Yeah. You agree with this? Go on. Yeah. Do you agree with that? Yeah. Yep. And then what happens is somewhere on that path, which I'm using attention and moving it here and moving it there, up, down, left, right, east, west, all of it. Somewhere in that, attention will notice itself. The eye of awareness, because we always say, the eye can't see itself. And that's true. What's the eye? What's the eye of oneness? What is your eye? Oneness. And I address myself to the Cindy unit. What's your eye? Isn't it your attention? Yes. And the attention is constantly looking out. But when it's looking out, it's in the dream. When it's looking in, it finds itself, which is because attention is focused awareness. And when attention begins to pay attention to attention, which it never does, you'll notice that. It's the one thing your attention never pays any attention to, is to itself. When we bring that in, we have a whole nother thing. When attention begins to recognize itself. When awareness becomes conscious of itself. Conscious awareness. There we have it, right? So because it's awareness becoming conscious of itself. The experience of one of these units, now to come back to talking in the same way that I did with Joel, to that practical level, when the experience of one of these, of the character, of the experience of oneness through one of these units will be, oh my God, everything is falling apart. I used to know stuff. And now I'm getting where I don't know anything. Because in the absence, and look at this, in the absence of language, what do you know? Zero. You could, other than the fact that you are, you know that. You know that you are. But if you, in the absence of language, you are just in the great unknowing. And the interesting thing is to notice that that great unknowing that seems so scary is another name for the great okayness. Because if we look at this, in the absence of language, there's no Fred. In the absence of language, I have to use language to even say that there's just this. And there's no Fred, there's no world. I don't know what this is. I can see that there's something here, or at least there's something appearing. That much I can see. But I don't know what it is. And in the absence of knowing who I am and what this is, what I notice is that in the absence of that knowing, there's no complaint. Because if I don't know what I am and I don't know what's going on here now, there is no possibility that I could know what should be going on. And in the absence of a story, which is what that voice in the head is, about what should be going on, I'm left with what is going on. Another word that we shorten that down to, I'm left with, instead of what should it be, I'm left with what is. Or what should be, I'm left with what is. And we can go beyond that, drop the what is, and then drop the I that's experiencing what is. And I've got a total loss of separation. And you can actually experience this just by taking a few seconds. Try it for a few minutes if you want. See, I can't record this on, I can't record me looking around in blank. I mean, I could, but no one will watch it or listen to it. It's something it's a practice that you need to do yourself. But when you do that, it throws you into the immediacy of your own being, because there's only now. So there's only oneness as it is. And as it is right now, oneness is perfectly content, but there is a Cindy character that's used to having a firm grip that is now finding it has no grip at all, or very little, or everything it grabs, it's like it just tears off. You know, I'm okay for just a minute, and then that tears off, and I'm falling again, and then I grab something else, and that's seen through, and I fall yet. And so, and the thing with that is that that's actually a very joyful occasion, because it's what we've been trying to do all these years. I want to wake up. I want to be clear. But when we start clearing, funny thing is, the first thing we know, we're afraid of it. So, because in this clearing process where I keep, things are falling away, and I feel unstable. I but listen to this. Listen to the thought that's causing the fear, that's causing the discomfort. And I should be stable. Is that true? No. It's just a thought. And you get to hold that thought just as long as you're willing to suffer over it. You know, I wouldn't even take that suffering away from you. And I would be delighted for you to have you discover it through this talk. But I won't. See, taking somebody's suffering away is you're taking away, for most of us, not all of us, but for most of us, we're taking away the very entry position of the very entry into awakeness. Because most of us arrive here not by the path of purity, but by the path of suffering. I had to suffer tremendously. I mean, Look, less than 20 years ago, I was living in a park. I was a bum. And I was a bum with just totally washed out human being. It's incredible. You can't get from there to here. It can't happen, but it did. But I just was such a believer in my own power and my own thinking, because listen, I mean, the fact that 10 years before I had been living in the suburbs, nice house, several cars, pretty wife, yard man, house cleaner, but nice library, all of this. And you know how I got from there to living in the bushes in a park where I was dying? I got there, the law wouldn't have let me make that jump all at once. They would have rescued me and taken me to a mental hospital until I cleared up. But I was tricked them. I didn't make that jump in one jump. I did it a little bit at a time. And it said, well, this is so. That's right. Well, this is a good idea. That's right. Here's the direction for you. That's right. And I listened to my thinking. And I tell you something right now. And I've been awake going on 10 years, and so to speak, dream language. And if I were to start running this life by my thinking, I'd be right back in the park. I don't even think I need to drink. Although I'm sure if I began to operate on my own thinking, I would just see what a good idea drinking would be for me. And see, the problem is that even though I'm awake, the body did not wake up. These patterns did not wake up. This is an alcoholic body. And I can have all the clever thoughts I want. I've had people tell me, well, you can drink now that you're awake. I mean, why don't you just go ahead? I said, really? And I said, God Almighty, you are every alcoholic's godsend. That's what they want to hear is that, yeah, now I can. But see, this is an alcoholic body. And they think just because I've got a new view that alcohol is not going to affect the body. And it is. I can tell you what, I don't give a shit if they're right. The only way I can find out is to risk everything I've got to see if they're right. I just rather conclude that they're wrong and not do it, because I don't play that dare game anymore, which is let me just roll the dice with the rest of my life. No. So what I do is I don't pay attention to those thinking. It still arises. Crazy thinking still occurs here on a more regular basis than I would be happy to admit. But I don't have to believe it. And there's the power. Do I have to believe these crazy thoughts that are not even my thoughts? It's just thoughts arising, and they're dream thoughts arising in the dream, which is fine. We're talking about the dream, really. It's dream thoughts arising to oneness. And if I don't take delivery of those, if I don't claim them, which is, I think you should buy robes and a funny hat. Thank you for sharing. Go back to sleep. Right? I'm pretty sure you can drink now that you're awake. Thank you for sharing. I'm not beating it back. I'm not trying to resist that thought. But because my nature is attention, if I play my attention on those thoughts, guess what? Whatever I put my attention on will expand in my experience. If I put my attention on those thoughts, they're going to grow, which means that by necessity, the truth has got to shrink. Which is the reason when you're doing something like what Joel said, is that it's a 1-2 punch. Because what's happening is, see, it ain't is that awakeness is already present when it decides to notice itself. Because Joel would not even know that Joel was asleep. All Joel would know is that this is the way things are and I'm right. That's what Joel's know. So there's already awakeness present when it decides to make itself more consciously awake. And when it does that, when it penetrates to the truth, look what you've done. You've withdrawn attention from the dream, which is, this is the way things are and I'm right. And you've also, and the second half of that punch is that you've now focused it on truth, which is there's no time, there's no Joel, there's no next, there's just this. And I'm not even using that language. I mean, I wouldn't be if I wasn't talking to you. There's boom. And what do I know? You know, some of you have heard this too, you're sick of it, but I love to tell it, so get ready. Back in the day in Athens, someone went to the oracle at Delphi and they said, ask the oracle, is there anyone in Athens wiser than Socrates? And the answer came back, no, there's no one in Athens wiser than Socrates. And this person went back. They probably had some other questions because it was about a 100-mile drive or 100-mile walk. But they went back to Athens and they shared the news that there was no one in Athens wiser than Socrates. And it's 100,000 people. It got around real quick. And that news got back to Socrates. And when he heard it, he was just shocked. And listen to his response. It's important to listen to the third person nature of his response. And this is reported as being true. I have no reason to doubt it. And Socrates said, Socrates is the wisest man in Athens? I mean, how can that be? Because Socrates doesn't know anything. And all of you know so much. And what he's saying is, and in the absence of that knowing, I'm living in the great okayness. How's the weather? It's fine. Well, what's it look like? Oh, it's cold and rainy and the sky's overcast and there's icicles everywhere and there's things shivering and all this kind of stuff. It's great weather. Thanks. Because it's the weather. And if I decide, and I can report, well, it's terrible weather. God almighty, it's cold, it's rainy, it's this, that, and the other. Things are shivering, things are dying. It's just, oh my God. And I've not changed that experience one iota. But I've changed my experience of it. Now I'm suffering. So the weather sucks. Is that true? If I'm planning on going on a picnic and it rains, I might, from a relative view, I can say the weather sucks if I'm willing to suffer for my belief, because the weather is just neutral. The weather just is. It doesn't have a position. The picnicker thinks it's terrible. The farmer thinks it's an act of God. What's the difference? The view. The view, but the thing itself is neutral. Okay, Cindy, I don't know if I got there, but I tried. My friend Mike up there. There you're unmuted. Hey, lower your hand, please.
Okay.
There we go. Good job. How are you?
All right, good. Hey, Fred. Hi, all.
Always good to see you.
Same here.
Thank you.
I was going to go with the idea of tricks or maybe tools would be better because it already occurred to me that maybe that's the complainer already trying to call it a trick. And maybe it's tools like, you know, Joel's rubber band, and Cindy's what's next, maybe turning that into a trick. Like I was thinking about that with my use of time, that instead of getting overwhelmed with so much of time or so much of what's next, that it's okay to bring it into what seems manageable. Like, you know, even trying to share here, I have the conditioning pattern of I've got to rehearse what I want to say. I've got to keep track of what I got to say. I got to remember what I say. And I'm not even that good at that anymore. So, okay, so I can remember that all I have to do right now is remember to raise my hand, you know, and, am I going to be interrupting you or Cindy if I do that? And
juggling all the possibilities, right?
Yeah.
Right?
So
Cindy said, I'm the people pleaser, right? I don't
yeah,
want
yeah, exactly.
others.
Yeah, and then there's so many patterns going on as well. Like it's okay. Well, so do I need to wonder about it as people pleasing, or is it a question of managing time? So okay, I'm just gonna raise my hand.
Notice here's the real key there. Notice that's what happened.
Yes. So even you. I mean, you are. Is it okay to use you as a tool for me now?
I notice that you do.
I do, right. So I guess it's going back to trying to be aware of okayness about it. Like,
well, let's look at it from the radical view right quick. How many of us are there?
One. One or none.
So is it okay for you to use me?
Yeah.
Since I don't exist and you don't either. So in other words, since there's just oneness, since there's just one of us, I would think that oneness utilizing oneness to maintain conscious oneness would be very, very skillful, and not everybody will do it.
Yeah. So I guess specifically about time, I guess going off last from Cindy, that it seems to be working for me to trick myself and to allow myself to what next just in a very short period of time. So, you know, if it occurs to me to what next is, okay, I'm just going to take a breath and allow myself to think that's what's next. And it kind of satisfies the what next a little bit. Instead of, if it's what's next, like, oh, you know, I've never had a career, and, you know, is this oneness practice going to finally work and get me a job where I can feel, you know, like comfortable around other people?
And so then notice that, so notice, please, that it's Mike that has all these questions.
Yeah.
Oneness actually already has a job.
Yeah, and I'm more and more comfortable with that. So, but the voice that something's wrong is like, but I'm still what nexting with, you know, like I should put on a nice shirt, you know, for you guys, you know, and then I want to blame myself for thinking that I did that.
You're gonna think. Here's another key.
Wrong.
This goes back to Cindy's question as well, which is that as long as there's identification with the body, significant identification with the body, there will be a sense of what next. And you can, in your idea of using of truncating what next to short-term stuff, that's skillful means. That's a bridge. It's perfectly fine. The other thing is, notice that we can still have goals, long-term goals, which is, you know, your short-term goal right now. I mean, your short means, you know, your what next is that I notice I got to go to the bathroom. So ultimately, it don't make any difference what decision I make. It's going to happen. So, but I notice it's more skillful if I make an active decision to go to the restroom. So short-term that's great. Use those short-term things. But being awakeness doesn't preclude us from making goals. What the difference is that we don't want to be, because the dream goes on until it doesn't. And I noticed that this unit, and for instance, would certainly encourage you to utilize it as a tool of awakening, because that's how it makes its living. You get that? So it still has to, in other words, it still has to make a living. It still has to operate in the everyday world. I don't live on a cloud. I live in Columbia, South Carolina, which is like sound asleep. But I know, I can look at my calendar and I can tell you what I'll be doing next. I mean, on any Thursday in May, I can look at it now and see that I have automatic people I meet every week. So I've got that scheduled, and I have every intention of meeting them in May. If I die, they'll do something else. If they die, I'll do something else. In other words, and they're not going to be doing anything, and neither am I. So what I'm really saying is that's the general direction that I'm moving in, but something else may happen. I'm not married to the idea that I should be talking to Marcia on this Thursday in May. Just if it happens, great. If it doesn't, go ahead, Mike.
So as far as goals, I want to jump in with.
Lower your hand, please.
So, with us being connected here and stating it now for me and wondering about it for you all, the goal of thinking of you guys, like I try to look at faces and names a little bit, but it's not bodies. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to not reinforce, from the mic end, but just want to have an intention of that goal of using our connection of
yes, because that's coming from the practical view, and the practical view is always, because there's going to be a sense of Mike there. There's no Mike there, but there's a sense of Fred here now. It's not very profound. I don't put much stock in it, but there's certainly a sense of Fred here now. And as long as there's a sense of Fred here, I notice it gets thirsty, right? So, I respond to that. I notice it there. So as long as there's a body here at all, there's going to be some identification. If I had come up behind Nisargadatta Maharaj and I had said, "Hey, Maharaj," he would have turned around. Not because he thought he was that little man on the floor, but because from a practical level, that's what you do. He doesn't need to prove to me that he is in the eternal state by ignoring that, although he could do that. You never know what Maharaj was going to do. But most likely, in most situations, he would turn around. Same thing that happens here is when I read comments about this, which it is very much. I mean, it's reading someone else's press. That much I can tell you. It's not reading my press. So as long as there's that sense of Mike-ness there, notice. So here's your general rule for this. For all decisions, as long as there's someone there that feels like they're making a decision, then make the wisest, most compassionate decision that you're capable of making, and then don't look back. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't change, that you can't take another direction the following day, completely different direction. But that's not looking back and saying, I shouldn't have done that. because that unit is always doing exactly what it's supposed to do. I know where the mic unit's supposed to be right now. It's supposed to be sitting in that chair listening to me. How do I know? Because that's what's happening. So if today you decide I'm going to put a rubber band on my hand, and that's going to remind me, and 25 times a day, I'm going to notice the truth, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to notice the truth for 5 or 10 or seconds or whatever it is you decide to do. Bully for you. And if tomorrow you forget the rubber band, oh, I should have remembered the rubber band. No, you shouldn't have, because you didn't remember it. So now I'm thinking that I projected that I'm letting, and now, and because notice this, is that I notice I consistently let myself down. Because I just, I just should be so much better. And God Almighty, I've got this double whammy, right? You're a spiritual teacher, man. What are you doing looking at her, right? I mean, you're supposed to be an awake being and a spiritual teacher. It's like, I know, but God, yesterday, Betsy and I went out to dinner, and it was just a little local place that we go. It's pizza and it's a sports bar, and so just before we sat down, she saw me looking. She didn't see anything but me. And she could just see me looking like this. And she said, I'll show her again in a minute. Sit down. She knew. That's what this unit's doing. That's that unconscious pattern. And I'm not going to get over that right away. Sex and food in particular, very tough. Sex is the survival of the species, and food is the survival of the individual unit. It's hard to control those things, Actually, it's impossible to control them. All you can do is begin to play your attention on them. That's what the reason that diets work when they work is simply because the unit's attention has been brought to this. And then when the attention goes, I really want a sandwich, the diet is broken because my attention has now been focused on the sandwich. I've drawn my attention away from one thing and put it on another. So what I've drawn it away from is now diminished, and what I'm putting it on is now enlarged. And so when I'm doing the many times a day thing like Joel, that's great. I am withdrawing attention from the dream and focusing it on the truth. 1-2 punch, bam, bam. Who has a question? Oh, let me do this. Does anyone who's on the phone have a question? No. Okay. So I can always just talk. But I find it so much more entertaining to answer questions. Ramesh, is that you? Are you sort of raising your hand? You have to unmute yourself so that I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. How are you?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, good.
So it was the question that I sent you on the mail.
Oh, yes. Yes. Repeat, give us the general gist of that. I remember I told you to bring it to meeting. Thank God I asked you. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me just grab that mail.
Yeah. I'll pop out as well because
okay. So yeah, I found it. Yes.
Okay.
So can I read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. There's only the one thing that is unfolding, and it does so according to natural laws, because there's only one thing going on, and everything is related and connected. And being a closed system must follow order when seen from duality point of view. We can verify this from our direct experience. There is no personal will as there is no person, but there is the experience as if a person or doer doing deeds, whereas all there is the doing. This too we can experience directly. Who then is making that conscious decision to change their beliefs and definitions so that they can experience emotions and feelings as per their preferences? Or who is it that we are recommending to let life unfold and get out of the way? Is this also not a part of the grand deception?
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. So let's go to the radical view first. It's part of the grand deception. There's only one thing. This whole meeting is nonsense, and what we're talking about here, the whole thing is pointless. There you have it. It's part of the great deception. There's no one there to notice itself during the day and all this kind of thing. There's no one there. Someone's phone is ringing. If they'll please mute themselves. Okay, Ramesh, mute yourself, please, because that's phone is apparently at your house.
Yeah.
I'll give him just a moment.
It's just going on, Fred. I can't.
Yes, I get it, and that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So, but what happens is I want you to notice that it is part of the grand deception, and that's the radical view. That's it's not the non-dual view, it's the absolute view. Because that's and notice that the absolute view may be absolutely true, but notice that it's not particularly useful.
Yep.
Hence, the reason I'm answering questions in two ways. Because that radical view that there's no one here, there's nothing to do, there's no one to do it, and all of that, heck, from the universal view, that's true. But it's not useful. It is useful in one area. It's useful in waking people up. It's a great strategy for waking people up, is to throw them against the wall over and over and over again. Which is and the way I can do that is when Cindy says that, golly, I seem to be unstable, I can just stop and say, who's that? Who's unstable? And it'll be recognized. She can, she'll search and there's no Cindy there, and it will be useful in its own way as far as building up these insights where she sees there's no Cindy. She's hit the wall, and then she says, but what about this? Who's saying that, right? There's only, and so what I is that? That's a radical view, and it's not a bad strategy, really. A lot of teachers employ it. It's not a bad strategy for helping people wake up. If it worked more often than it does, I might employ it, but it doesn't. But I notice it's not really all that effective. But it's more effective than many other strategies. So we need it. There are people that can only hear it that way. We know because that's how they're hearing it. So it's not a matter of this teaching is better or that, or it's different, because it's different, because different people got to hear it in different ways. The practical side of what you're doing there is what I've answered already, which is the fact that so long as it feels like there's someone there that can bring themselves to greater clarity by doing so and so, employ it. When it gets to where there's no sense whatsoever of a body there, then I'll come over to Georgia and go to your funeral. Because the body will have lost its ability to care for, the biology will have lost the ability to care for itself. Because it'll be just like, well, I'm so thirsty and I just can't get enough. And I've been drinking from this cup all morning, and yet I'm just still thirsty, and there's water running down my shoulder, right? Because there's not enough identification here to get the cup to my mouth. That's what I'm saying. We want to get rid of conditioning. Actually we don't. We just want to see through it. That's all and when we see through conditioning, unskillful patterns are brought to the light of consciousness, brought to the light of awareness, and that unconscious pattern will begin to change. So it is so the philosophy. So another way to look at this when I talk about the radical and the practical is that in the philosophy, yes, there's no doer. It's all part of the great deception. But who's experiencing it? That's what I want to know. I just want to know who's experiencing this great deception. If there's no Ramesh and there's no Fred, then it can't be Ramesh and Fred that are experiencing it. It's oneness itself that's having an experience of a Ramesh and a Fred. See, our first inclination as we begin to awaken is that, oh my God, I've been dreaming. It's incredible. I've been dreaming like crazy. It starts right here, right here at the edges of my face. And the dream goes out just like that, conically in all directions. But when we actually awaken, and this can be lost until it's not. It can be lost again. But when we actually awaken, then what we see is that the camera of reality, the camera or the camera of the dream, the camera that's is not here, because there's always that sense that I'm dreaming, Fred's dreaming. Yeah, God is nothing but oneness except for Fred. Right? I'm the one thing that's outside of oneness. Can't be. There's oneness or there's not. The camera, and this can happen where you can see it visually, which I have done, where you can, and you've heard about it a million times. People say, I'm above my body, behind my body, whatever. But it's seen that the dream is 360 degrees, and that this is just another object in the dream. So from the philosophy of non-duality, then there is no doer. But when we say there's just doing, how accurate is that? That's even that is in the dream. We say, this is where, and I know who says those things, some very, very skillful teachers, and I will say it too. And I'll mean the same thing they meant when they said it, which is that it's all just happening. That's what they mean. So this is not orchestrated by me, it's just happening. Or it's not orchestrated by anybody, it's just happening. That's what they mean. There's just the doing. There's no one there to do it. But I don't even know if this doing is happening. From the standpoint of noneness, it's not even happening. So there's not even any doing. It's important to see this truth, because the impact of recognizing, well, my God, the great deception is non-duality, the non-duality that we're studying here and learning to embody and live. Even that's occurring within the dream. It's staggering. The mind cannot get itself around it. So, on a more practical level, because there's the experience of a Ramesh. There's experience, there is still, oneness is still experiencing that biology. And there's some subtle identification there, or the fork can't get to the mouth. So as long as that exists, then the philosophy, if we try to live by the philosophy of non-duality, then I always suggest that that's like putting on a concrete overcoat. Because it's just, I can't move, I'm trapped, right? Because I can't, because I need to go to the store, but there's no one to go, right? What am I going to do? I mean, and there's no one to need to go to the store. So, I mean, and I want to, and this is the philosophy. Is the philosophy, following the philosophy of non-duality will have you living in nonsense. Living the truth of yourself. Living the truth that the teaching of non-duality is pointing toward. That's freedom. The freedom is not in the philosophy. And those of us who have had a lot of exposure, and there's not anybody in this room who's not very, very smart. Dumb people don't call me. Just, they're not attracted to this. And these big minds, these big brains, they want to know what is the secret handshake to this awakening deal. I want to know, says who? What has to be seen is that that big brain is never going to figure this out. I can't figure it out. I found out also that I don't need to. I don't even try to figure it out. And when I talk about things that seem like, well, how the hell does he know that? That's just stuff that's been seen. I'm not putting, when I heard this guy, this scientist speak this week, and about some of the things that we talked about here, it was just like ding, 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 ding. So he's talking about the same thing I'm talking about, but he's using a different language. So what I did was I translated from mysticism into science what he was talking about. And I can turn it the other way too. But it was already seen. I didn't hear about this and then and then it's not like that. It's seen. It's known. These are these insights you'll notice that occur. Big insights we call awakenings. I had that big insight I've told some of you about, 4 weeks ago on a Sunday. And it was just, but I didn't see more deeply into the truth. I saw more deeply into the dream, which is the same thing as seeing more deeply into the truth. Because when I see what's not true, then I'm no longer confused by it. Thus clarity arises. That's the end of our session. Great. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Robin. Great to see everybody again today. I hope we can make this something of a tradition. We'll do this again in 2 weeks. I'll announce it on the website. Next week, I'm on staycation. And I really do love you all.
Thanks, Fred.
Thank you. Bye-bye. See you, Ramesh.
Okay.